The apartment was advertised as the silent room, a haven for writers, artists, and introverts, anyone craving respite from the cacophony of city life. Grace was sold on the idea immediately. After years of enduring thudding footsteps from upstairs neighbors and the endless hum of traffic, the promise of silence seemed too good to be true. The building manager reassured her that the thick concrete walls and triple-sealed doors ensured complete soundproofing. Grace signed the lease without a second thought. The first few days in her new home were blissful. The silence was deep and comforting, like a heavy blanket on a cold night. For the first time in years, Grace could hear herself think. She spent hours writing, her creativity unfurling in the tranquil stillness. The only sounds were those she made herself, the soft scrape of her pen on paper, the whisper of her slippers against the hardwood floors. It was on the fifth night that Grace first noticed it. Lying in bed, surrounded by the stillness she had come to cherish, she heard a faint murmur. It was so soft, at first she thought it might be her imagination, the auditory equivalent of a phantom itch. But as she lay there, straining to listen, the sound grew clearer. It was a whisper, too faint to discern words, but unmistakably human. Grace sat up, her heart thudding in her chest. The sound was coming from the wall behind her bed, the wall that bordered the vacant apartment next door. She tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the building wasn't as soundproof as advertised. Maybe someone had moved into the neighboring unit without her knowledge. But when she asked the building manager the next day, he assured her that the apartment was still empty. He even offered to show her the untouched lease agreement as proof. Grace laughed it off, embarrassed by her paranoia. But that night the whispers returned, louder this time, though still indecipherable. They seemed to rise and fall like a conversation carried out just beyond her understanding. She pressed her ear to the wall, hoping to catch a word, a phrase, anything to make sense of it, but the whispers remained maddeningly elusive. The next morning, Grace knocked on the door of the apartment next to hers. She stood in the hallway for a long time, her knuckles still tingling from the sharp raps. No answer came. She tried the doorknob, but it was locked. Peering through the peephole revealed nothing but darkness within. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers persisted. They grew louder each night, filling her dreams with shadows and half-formed thoughts. Grace's writing began to suffer. The silence she had once treasured now felt oppressive. The whispers an invasive pulse beneath its surface. She spent hours sitting by the wall, notebook in hand, trying to capture the rhythm of the voices, but every attempt ended in frustration, the whispers slipping through her grasp like smoke. One evening, desperate for answers, Grace decided to investigate further. She waited until the building was quiet, then used a bobby pin to pick the lock on the apartment next door. Her hands shook as the door creaked open, revealing a space that was eerily pristine. The air was heavy, as if no one had stepped inside for years. Dust blanketed every surface, undisturbed. The layout was identical to her own apartment, a small living room, a kitchenette, a single bedroom. Grace moved through the rooms slowly, her breath loud in the stillness. Nothing seemed out of place. No signs of life, no explanation for the whispers. Yet the feeling of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. In the bedroom she found it. The wall that adjoined her own had been stripped of its plaster, exposing the bare concrete beneath. Strange symbols were etched into the surface, their lines jagged and chaotic. The symbols seemed to pulsate in the dim light, their edges swimming as if alive. Grace reached out, her fingers trembling. The moment her skin touched the cold concrete, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar. It was as if every voice she had ever heard was speaking at once, a cacophony of rage and despair. She stumbled back, clutching her ears, but the sound was inside her head, gnawing at her thoughts. She fled the apartment, slamming the door behind her. Back in her own space, she locked herself in the bathroom, her chest heaving. The whispers had followed her. They were louder now, filling every corner of her apartment. She could no longer pretend they weren't real. Over the next few days, Grace's world unraveled. The whispers consumed her every waking moment, seeping into her dreams. She stopped eating, stopped writing. Her reflection in the mirror grew gaunt. her eyes hollow. The symbols from the wall burned in her mind, their jagged lines etched into her thoughts. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Grace returned to the vacant apartment. She carried a hammer, her resolve forged in desperation. The whispers guided her, pulling her toward the bedroom wall. With a single swing, she struck the concrete. The sound echoed through the empty space, a sharp crack that seemed to shatter the air itself. The wall crumbled easily as if it had been waiting for her. Behind it was a hollow cavity, and within the darkness something stirred. Grace saw only glimpses, pale, writhing shapes, empty, soulless eyes. The whispers coalesced into a scream, a sound that wasn't meant for human ears. She ran, leaving the hammer behind. She fled the building and never returned. The apartment was found abandoned, her belongings untouched. No one ever moved into the silent room again, but those who passed by swore they could hear whispers leaking through the walls, faint and insistent, as if the silence itself was alive and hungry.